So the Europe Center's fields of research include multiple areas that are central to the films that have been chosen for this year's film festival, especially under our rubric of reconciliation. It's our large topic of how to reconcile along lines of ethnic identity, historical enmity, immigration, how to help different groups assimilate as they join larger communities coming into the Western world, the global movements of peoples. It's a major research topic here at Stanford in our research, in our Europe Center. And we're very pleased that a number of films address these topics.
What we try to do at Center for South Asia is to raise the awareness of South Asia as an area in the world that's interesting, not just because of the GDP growth in the region, which is what catches a lot of attention at the moment, but we think that South Asia, both in its historical sense and its present form, but also in its future, it's one of the crucial places in the world. So everybody needs to take an interest in South Asia, not just because of South Asia, but because of global concerns.
6 Degrees is Stanford's only student-run human rights magazine and publication, and our goal is to find people who have written about these human rights issues on their own terms. We're not forcing them. We're not saying, look at this genocide, write something for us about it. We want them to be inspired on their own terms. So we go and find people who've written papers for classes or senior theses about these issues, and we ask them to submit their papers for publication. And people are generally very willing to do that for a student-run publication.
Fatal Promises is one of my favorites from having served on the jury at this year's film festival. And here at the Europe Center, we've sponsored a number of research projects on human trafficking. Especially, we had an international conference recently on basically the phenomenon of trafficking women and children from east to west, from post-communist Eastern Europe through Central Europe to the West. It's a major issue with multiple areas of concern, from policing, organized crime, as well as healthcare, the underground economy. The film that we have in the festival shows this on a very personal level, perhaps as a good complement to the research we do at our center.
So we really make an effort to get papers that aren't very mainstream human rights issues. We try to find students who've written about things that aren't necessarily on the front page of the newspaper, that people wouldn't be reading about in depth like that, and we put them in our magazine so that the student body can become educated about those issues.
So The Power of Art I found to be a really unusual film for a documentary film festival, because it shows, in a sense, how artists mediate our engagement with the major issues of reconciliation of ethnic communities that have been persecuted over the years, as well as by gender. And The Power of Art showed to me, and I think my fellow members of the film jury, the potential for artists to express with their art the engagement of moving on beyond the moment of reconciling past atrocities and crimes, and engaging the next world, the next generation.
I think that 6 Degrees and UNAFF have very similar motivations in especially getting student work and getting not so mainstream human rights issues out in public. They're both different forms of media, so we do it through these publications, and UNAFF does it through filmmaking, and I think that a collaboration could be really successful.
So the Haas Center for Public Service has existed since 1985. It's 25 years old, and it serves to really connect students, staff, and faculty to local community opportunities that are going to create social change through scholarship, community partnerships, and service.
Paradise Hotel is a notable film both for the subject and I think for its, you could call it, artistic representation. It's a film that gives a human face as well as a place to the topic of the Roma and their communities in the West, in Europe. It was a subject in my recent book on ethnic Europe, It's a focus of multiple research projects here at our Europe Center. And it's a topic of concern in Europe. There was the recent revelation of a French high-level government memo that particularly targeted the expulsion of Roma camps in France. And there has been multiple responses from the European Union, the European Commission for Human Rights. So it brings to light multiple areas of concern, but I would note this film in quite a visually stunning format.
So one of the Haas Center's three focus areas is education. We look at education, health, and environmental sustainability. And the way that the Haas Center connects to UNAFF is that we have a series of programs, 5 of them actually, that are focused on improving educational opportunity and equity. And my understanding is that the film festival this year's focus is on education as a human right. So we have students who are involved in programs that are going out into the local community, serving students from preschool all the way through high school, trying to provide those students with access to a higher level of education and educational opportunity.
Our school gives a very interesting, you could call it a more localized story, so give it a focus on, I found that film very interesting in serving on the jury because it raises the question of how and whether and how to integrate different communities, such as the Roma, who have, like other communities, their own local traditions, cultural identities, practices, family stories, and on the one hand, integrating the children of the Roma into local schools helps assimilate the next generation into the economy and the communities. On the other hand, there's the concern about losing cultural traditions and heritage, and I think our school is a wonderful look at this question.
What we know is that education and knowledge is power. All around the world, when communities get education that haven't had it, the whole economy grows and people become empowered. Here in Palo Alto, unfortunately, we've had the additional problem of teen suicide in recent years. So we've really doubled down our commitment in focusing on teen empowerment, on education for kids, on understanding their place in the world, de-stressing, if you will, our community. It's such an important issue, both teen mental health and education. It's wonderful that the Film Festival is focusing on it this year.
6 Degrees doesn't try to target the education issues within human rights specifically, but a lot of our articles do have a lot of education issues within them because I think that education is such a huge part of almost any human rights issue. And the way that we're working with education is that we're trying to educate the Stanford population. We do a little bit of advocacy, a little bit of publicity and things like that, but our main goal is to just tell people what's happening so that they can go out and do something about it themselves. So really educating the Stanford student population about those issues.
So you find, in a way that I don't think is quite matched by most other places in the world, perhaps China, you find a scramble for education where families will go through years, if not decades, of saving just to have one child educated, and will put enormous emphasis on the status and the pride that comes out of this. And of course also enormous frustration when it turns out that some of the educational institutions in the country of India or other places don't actually deliver a very good education, especially at the lower rungs of the sort of hierarchy of institutions. And even more frustration when it turns out that you move into the city with your degree or whatever, and it turns out you don't actually get a job because you have formally an education. You have also acquired a new sense of the world and a sense of your own worth by virtue of being educated. But you don't get a job because still many jobs are given not on the basis of your qualification, but on the basis of how much you pay in order to pay to bribe the ones who is hiring, or whether you have the right family connections, whether you have the right accent, whether you carry yourself in a way that's consonant with sort of dominant ideas of sort of elite behavior and so on and so forth. So a lot of people, even though they have education, come up against all these invisible barriers, the glass ceiling of, and there's not just one glass ceiling like maybe one can talk about in the US with regards to women or with regards to minorities, but there are multiple ceilings in South Asia.
Palo Alto is, of course, the center of innovation, at birthplace of Silicon Valley, and home to so many companies around the world working globally that are focused on corporate social responsibility, that are focused on engaging in the social needs and the social problems within their communities and working to address them. That's what the theme as well is so often for films that we see in the UN Association Film Festival. They resonate with companies here in the Valley.
So Atomic Alert is especially a notable film to catch at this year's festival. It's part of our research as well. We affiliate with a research center here at the Friedman Spogli Institute on security. So we have a number of visiting researchers coming from Europe, especially from Scandinavia, who are looking at how to reduce the number of nuclear weapons that are distributed across the superpowers, as well as, in a sense, reconciling the energy benefits and the potentially smaller carbon footprint of nuclear power generation with the possibilities of sustainable alternative energy sources. So Atomic Alert really brings to bear on this question the history of European attention to the question of the consequences of nuclear energy production and the attention that the current generations are focusing on how to overcome these consequences and possibly find new sources of energy.
One of the things that students do, one of the programs that the Haas Center has that engages students in service is something called Alternative Spring Break. And those students actually go out and they'll have a course in the winter term that prepares them for study of an issue. And many of these issues are immigration, education, the environment, many of the same topics that the film festival addresses. So the film festival can be a useful tool for us to engage our students in thinking about these issues either before the trip or after the trip. Likewise, we have something called Impact Abroad that's like an international alternative spring break that happens during the summer. And again, students get involved in a range of issues that the films are actually going to be speaking to.
The prosecutor Luis Moreno Ocampo is one of my favorites. Here at the Europe Center, we brought Luis Moreno Ocampo to Stanford University for some high-level discussions on particular cases that he was bringing forward to the United Nations crimes against humanity. And he himself discussed the difficulties and challenges of bringing prosecution against sitting heads of state. It's a particularly important opportunity to see the profile of his own biography as well as his role in the court. And to know what scholars here at Stanford and the Europe Center are discussing in some of these high-level discussions.
What's so powerful about the United Nations Association Film Festival is that it deals with themes that resonate in every community. Here in Palo Alto, we have had a long focus on education. We started with Stanford, and we've had that commitment and that theme in our community for a long time. So to have that as a focus of this year's film festival is really going to resonate with our local community.